My doctoral research was about spontaneous architecture, and last year, in the same place, I made a presentation about spontaneous architecture and spontaneous creation, and that was concerning about structure and shaping, the special relation between the background structures and the derived forms that we also call design or designing. And now I can connect to Albert's presentation, because he was mentioning that we must use a design thinking. And I must somehow complete your presentation, saying that design is a very double-phased phenomenon. It's just like a sharp knife. You can cut bread and you can make a mass murder. So shaping is a very, very, very important tool for humans. And this is somehow some theoretical explanation how I think basic structures are the elementary phenomenon that we cannot perceive, and we cut certain shapes, and this way we make design and we gain design objects. Of course, it's a very Platonic approach, and I should mention two very important people, Derrida, Jacques Derrida and Noam Chomsky. They both were concerned to these mysterious background structures, and also, of course, Wittgenstein, who was the expert of late Wittgenstein, who was the expert of meaning. That is a pragmatic category. And here, this is my most important figure. I also showed last year, but it's so complicated, even by myself, it's still very complicated. So I try to explain the core of design, the core of shaping. The problem with shaping is that when we would like to make categories, we are examining some certain object, and when we zooming in to a certain detail of the object, at the very end, not at the very end, but at a certain point, we see the jiggling atoms of the object. Those are making heat motion. The problem with this, on this picture, you can see that there is no outline of the story. So it's a very special phenomenon how we can define a chair, for example, since in reality there are no exact outline or contour of the object. And that means that or I, that are put together from the same atoms, that this chair, for example, got in a certain relation with the observed object. And shaping is nothing else but the relation between my eyes and the jiggling atoms of the chair or of any other object that I'm examining. So I just want to emphasize that shaping is not only one thing over a billion of duties in our world, but it's some kind of basic phenomenon, because our orientation in the world, the only tool that we can use for perceiving the background real structures that we can call reality, whatever it is only this way how we can get closer to shapes. And Wittgenstein said, when, for example, we would like to define a category, or we would like to define an object, like a chair, for example, the only way is to make some statistical approach. In our life, we examine thousands, millions of examples of chairs. Those are all different, but at the end, we gain some certain certain picture, some certain definition of a chair. And why I said that design is a metaphor. Design is a metaphor of reality. For handling the world, for handling our problems, it would be necessary to understand those background structures, those are responsible for all the happenings we are surrounded by. But only the design, so shaping, making categories, is the only way how to handle them. So they are standing for the background structures, like metaphors are standing for some certain phenomenon. And of course, when I say design, when I'm speaking about design, I'm also making a design process because I'm creating a certain category. So design is a design itself. As metaphor is also a metaphor because I don't know, I cannot define metaphors. So I produce a word, metaphor, and I use it for the mysterious meaning, the mysterious content of metaphor. And now I would like to emphasize that we have a childish, infantile obsession for shapes, forms, and design. And this is some kind of warning for ourselves, and warning for Albert, and for warning myself as well, even though I'm a designer, that we should be careful with shaping. We have an evolutionary heritage to assume agents behind phenomena. So for example, in the old ages when we saw the moving grass behind us, it would be very useful to assume a lion and not wind, because in the opposite case, we could have been eaten by the lion. We are very much afraid of nothing. We have an instinct to escape from nothing, so it is called horror vacui, fear from nothing, and it's also a motivation to create shapes. So most of people like patterns all around. Even they like patterns without meaning, because patterns are somehow very, very familiar for us, and they somehow they make us forget that sometimes we are surrounded by pure nothing. We get in our car and put some music. That's a pattern to escape from nothing. Of course, shape is sexy, so we have a very almost erotic attraction for shapes. You can see the car industry is very much concerning on this instinct of us. We like streamlining things because the original background structures are infinitely complex, and we try to streamline them for easier consuming. But of course, when you streamline something, you lose very important details. And these expressions I show up because they are all about my warning about the dangers of using shapes and forms. Of course, morals are also typical design things. They tell you don't kill, don't steal. Of course, these things are 100 times or 1,000 times more complicated. But for a mass of people, you cannot speak in a too complex way. So you need simplifying. But simplifying is also means always losing important details, opinions about certain things. People, this is a bad person, this is a good person. Truth is boringly simplifying. Everybody has his or her own truth that is much, much more simple than the background structures. Ideologies, of course, decisions when we have to choose between left or right, even though there are much more directions, but we are forced in certain situations to choose between simple directions. Simple stories, we are attracted very much. The whole Hollywood movie industry is based on simple stories, but you must remember when you are listening to a simple story and you are getting under the influence of it, you are lowering your IQ by 10 points at least, hopefully just temporary. Rules, like morals, are also design products. Religions, of course, and the rules of religions are typically design results, design products, styles and fashions. Obviously, the same categories. Styles, of course, last longer period than fashions, but the same quality. Words, for example, in languages, words are the perceivable parts of language. Background structure, like grammar, is much more complex, and everyday people mostly concern on words. When they speak about language, amateur linguistics mostly concerned on words, not grammar, because grammar is a structure, and structures are uncomfortably complex. Names, when you give a name, sometimes it is the time when that things begin to exist. Thomas Mann wrote a lot about giving names, also a design process. Interpretations, when I see a complex thing and I interpret it, it also means simplifying for consume. And constructive memory in psychology, it's a very well-known effect. When I have some memory about some happening, and when I lost some part of it, I complete the lost part of the story without knowing it. So it's a unconscious instinct of human to use constructive memory, and we really think it was the truth, even you can prove it was not. Populism, now I don't have to really explain the connotations, especially nowadays. Imprinting phenomenon, when the small duck first looks at a certain shape, it will consider that shape to its mother, even it's a human, even it's any other object. So we have a very, very instinct attraction for shapes. Nations, for example. Nobody can define a nation, but we are very, yes, I'm from Hungary, and no, we are struggling with these problems. But of course, people like to hear that they belong to some category, even they don't know what it is. Pop art, we have heard about this. Of course, pop art is also a simple story in a way. Pop music, normally a pop song is 3 minutes, very easy to understand, but of course it's different from the late Beethoven violin quartets. Those are not so popular, but far not so much. ID, intelligent design, I mean ID, that's a very special phenomenon. Maybe you have heard about it. It's, of course, it's a very simple story that the world is created by a big designer. Markers are you know, my body is a marker of my DNA system. Much more simple than my DNA. But you can check my DNA through my body, that is a marker. Models, scientific models, for example, are also created as design products. And design always suggests that it is absolute. So it is we must think that design is equal with the background structure. That is not the case. False references, for example. There is a human body, and this is a projection of a human body, and we assume the background structure of this projection. But of course, it can be a very, very bad assumption, because the projection design, the derived shape, and the mother structure, you can say, is not symmetrical. So you cannot say from the projection the background structure. So the dangerous asymmetry. Alan Sokal, the famous mathematician who made a false mathematical article in a famous American journal, Social Text, without any meaning, they published it, and it turned out it was just cheating, because the shaping of the article was seemed to be very valid. Evolution, I think evolution is the only way for shaping. So if you shape, you should somehow use evolution. Evolution uses mutations. Mutations, in most of the cases, are false. These are false mutations in architecture. But if you have time for the mutations, you gain vernacular architecture or vernacular design or vernacular shaping, and this vernacularity is much more gentle and much more valid projection of the background structures. Of course, natural structures like broken glass is a vernacular language of material itself, so you can trust in it. Compressed evolution, I mean, for example, if you are a designer, for example, if you are a designer, I'm a designer. If you are a good designer, we have a compressed evolution in our brain with a large history of experience, so we can create by evolution. Kitsch, I made my workshop about kitsch, and the last keyword is force field. So now I made a force field here, because background structure, you can say background structures are force fields, and the force field, from a force field you can gain derivations, you can derive shapes for the force field, as in quantum mechanics, for example. There's a force field, you can see the Schrödinger's equations. From a force field, you can gain the certain shapes and phenomena. And now, at the very end of my lecture, we gained a nice force field. And that was my lecture. You can see all the keywords on one surface, and as saying goodbye to you, I tried to make a design from this force field. I tried to gain something from this force field.